On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Clayburgh Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. On Story, presented by Austin Film Festival, a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers and directors. This week's On Story, Unforgiven, is deconstructed by Apaloosa's Robert Knott and Into the West's Kirk Ellis.
The Western came to be at a time when America was still thinking large and was still thinking very expansively. We think of Westerns, we think of John Ford, we think of Monument Valley. America as a landscape has gotten smaller, and unfortunately so is its imagination, and I think the Western has actually been a casualty of that. I'm hopeful that we will one day return to a mindscape in which we can think about a frontier in which people can renew themselves and reinvent themselves.
In this episode, Kirk Ellis and Robert Knott explore the gritty action, ambiguous morality, and the tried and true tropes of Clint Eastwood and David Peoples' Unforgiven.
I mean, I've always been a fan of End of the West Westerns. You know, The Wild Bunch is one of those Westerns. Anthony Mann's last great Western, really, Man of the West with Gary Cooper is an End of the West Western. Very, very bleak. Unforgiven to me is a final statement. You know, people ask why, you know, Peckinpah really never made another good Western after Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. It's because when you've seen Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid in the form that Peckinpah intended, there's nothing more you can say about it. It's the same reason we really haven't seen and probably won't see another Clint Eastwood Western. You know, yeah. This is it. This is it. And it's an example of a movie that acknowledges and honors and then completely subverts the Western genre in a way that also really exposes the nature of that period in time. I find it very interesting from a historical point of view, too.
And if you go through a beat sheet of this script, it's flawless. From the character standpoint, from the motivation, you take out all the extraneous words in that plot summary, and it's like, wow, this is just pretty incredible.
Peoples wrote this script in the 1970s. You have to remember that a lot of guys writing scripts at that period were reflecting the experience of the time. Yeah. And very often in Westerns, that ended up in incredibly preachy and now kind of unwatchable movies like Soldier Blue. But this movie, which is refracting all of the violence in American society in that period, made almost 25 years after it was written, still stands out in a very contemporary way because it doesn't have any of that baggage with it. It's got to be one of the grubbiest and most unpromising introductions for a major character in the history of Westerns. I mean, he's covered in pig from head to foot. He can barely control his kids, let alone the hogs. You know, he's got this young pipsqueak who comes in with this job offer. And of course, one of the other things about this movie is about reputation and about the truth. And virtually everything the Schofield kid tells him is a lie. There's so many things operating in this scene. You're always wanting your introductory scenes of characters to be this microcosm of the whole film. So we learn so much not only about money in this movie, Money the character, but also what this film is going to deal with. It's going to deal with the fact that there is an obsession with weaponry on the frontier. The violence is always exaggerated. As savage as it is, when people talk about it, the situation gets worse and worse. It becomes a kind of running gag through this movie. And it's also the fact that Money is telling himself, and has been telling himself, obviously for years since his wife died, I'm not like that anymore.
$1,000 for Wardwell. $500 apiece.
Pa? I can't move those damn pigs.
Watch your cussing now, will you? Do the best you can with it and go to the pump and get yourself cleaned up. Come on, come on. I ain't like that anymore, kid.
And we're going to find out over the course of this narrative, not only is he still like that, he's worse. So many things are operating in here that you don't know about until you've seen the film. What you're left with is a sense of this deeply desperate man who his one shot is this revenge killing, essentially, and it just sets up the world so well. This is really the story of a literal dead man walking. Eastwood, at the beginning of this film, is a man who is, for all intents and purposes, dead to the world. But he can still hold on to this kind of spiritual spark that his wife left him with. Yeah. By the end of this movie, he's spiritually dead too.
One of the things that people sometimes talk about is that even though it's 2 hours long, it's a straight shoot. So people sometimes wonder about the scene that we're getting ready to watch, which is where Richard Harris is an English gunfighter who comes to town. And some analysts have said that it's extraneous. I think we could make a case that it's absolutely not. You know, that there's really nothing wasted in this movie.
Boys, this here's English Bob.
Thanks.
Been a long time, Bob. Did you run out of...
Bill. Well, I thought you was, I thought that you were dead.
What we get to see is what a badass little Bill is, you know, and that sets the stage for, you know, Clint, you're not just dealing with a mild-mannered sheriff here. You're dealing with a guy that knows no limits and is actually quite brutal.
You see Gene Hackman literally kick Richard Harris almost to death. Yeah. And this is the lawman wearing the badge, okay, who, when necessary, can exert violence of a sort that nobody's ever seen.
I guess you think I'm kicking you, Bob. It ain't so. But I'm doing it this time.
One of the points that Peoples is making, that Eastwood is so beautifully realizing in his construction of the visual imagery in the film, is that there is a very, very fine line in the West that divides the good men from the bad men. So fine, in fact, that you can't actually define good or bad anymore.
One of the things that this movie is about is appearance and reality, which is something that Westerns have dealt with. You know, we were talking about Liberty Valance in the last panel. You know, when print the legend, when it's more true than the truth. And we've got this scene where the sheriff in Big Whiskey is going to sit down. He's beaten up the English gunfighter, and he's going to sit down with his biographer, a dime novelist who follows him around. So what happens is basically Gene Hackman talks about what actually happened in the bar that night, that Richard Harris's character shot all these people, and basically it was not a feat of bravery and gunplay. It was, Richard Harris was really drunk, and the other guy was really unlucky, and that sort of is what set everything off.
You see, if old Corky had 2 guns instead of just... he would have been there right to the end to defend himself.
Wait a minute, you mean that English Bob killed him when he didn't even have...
Well, old Bob wasn't going to wait for Corky to grow a new hand. No, he just walked over there real slow. Because he was drunk. Shot him right through the liver.
The whole point is that Hackman is saying, here's what actually happened, here's what was written, none of it was true.
We're used to that sort of high noon, clean, whoever draws fastest is going to win kind of thing, which is the Western mythology. And what this scene is also setting up for us is that final gunfight, which is ugly and brutal, and Eastwood's character is lucky, in a sense.
What will happen in the film is that the Saul Rubinet character will then witness a gunfight, okay, in detail, okay, in which Eastwood basically kills everybody in an entire bar, and then stops to explain exactly how he did it so he can get it right in his next book.
Who'd you kill first? When confronted by superior numbers, an experienced gunfighter will always fire on the best shot first.
Is that so?
Yeah, little Bill told me that. And you probably killed him first, didn't you?
I was lucky in the order. But I've always been lucky when it comes to killing folks.
So to sort of take us to To Kill a Man, which in some ways for me is kind of like the thematic center. It's like this is what this story was really about.
It's hard because, there's so many ways you can look at the scene. One of them is that just from a genre level, It's extremely unusual to have a scene that discusses the responsibility and the effect of violence the way this one does. Right. Okay, even in the strongest anti-westerns of the 50s and 60s. You know, if you remember the end of The Wild Bunch, there's a kind of triumphalist nature of it at the end because everything reverts to nostalgia. And you know, after they're all gunned down in the battle with the Mexican general, we go to a flashback to their one moment of happiness in the Mexican village. So Peckinpah takes you out of it on a kind of upbeat. There's no upbeat to this, and partly it's the way Eastwood realizes it. I don't think the scene would have nearly as much impact were it shot on a sunny day without wind, you know, where there's absolutely no kind of gradation in the light. It's all very, very dark. But it's also, I think, what makes the scene work is that I think there's 12 lines of dialogue in the whole scene. And every one of them gets right to the heart of what's going on. There's so many good things that happen in this movie. It's a kind of textbook for screenwriters. You know, Eastwood's character doesn't speak that much. The kid speaks a lot, you know, and you have this uncomfortable moment of this very burnout man, you know, who has to in some kind of way comfort this young boy who may be going down a path of violence, and the only thing he can tell him is, absolutely right, everything you did was so terrible. In fact, it's even more terrible than you think it was.
Yeah. Jesus Christ. It don't seem real. I ain't gonna never breathe again, ever. How he's dead. And the other one, too. All on account of pulling a trigger.
It's a hell of a thing, killing a man. You take away all he's got, and all he's ever gonna have.
There's all kinds of stuff that's meant to be redemptive that turns out not to be redemptive at the end of the movie. I mean, clearly Little Bill's a bad guy, he's got to go. The movie's redemption is essentially, well, Little Bill, the guy who perpetrated all of this really, is now dead. But that's not where the movie ends. Eastwood leaves the saloon. There's a guy who's clearly mortally wounded and dying, just blows him away with a rifle at point blank range. His last admonition is that, you know, you'd better bury my friend Ned Wright, and no harm had better come to those horrors, or I'll come back and I'll kill all you. And then the sort of archetypal character, the whore with the heart of gold, with whom he's developed a kind of relationship, comes out and he rides right past her. Yeah. You know, because there's no redemption for this guy. And then in the end, as he doesn't ride off into the sunset, he rides off into the void, into nothingness. Westerns are all about how you can't escape who you are. The West being that transformative landscape under which people's real personality comes out. Now you see the sort of negative side of that. You know, somebody who tries to escape from his essential nature and is then brought back into it to a point where he annihilates himself.
You've been watching a deconstruction of the classic anti-Western Unforgiven on Story. Next up, filmmaker Christian Baker and his short film, The Well.
Hi, my name is Christian Baker. I am the writer and director of the short Western, The Well. The Well was a really important story for me to tell because I really wanted to examine the idea of violence as perceived as a rite of passage. And the main character in this film thinks that if he kills someone in the heat of battle, he can return home a war hero and he'll be, you know, he kind of perceives it as his becoming a man. I really wanted to take that and, you know, show what kind of consequences that action could have on someone psychologically. Up next is my short film, The Well, and I really hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching.
Where's this land? Back at the beginning of time. Made it so vile. What power would force a creature to live here? Amidst the rock. Amidst the dust. Left alone to fend for itself in this wretched province. These woeful spirits under the sun. Do they give credence to a higher authority? Do they seek its mercy?
Now you listen here and you listen here good. I've been placed to guard this here well, prevent from satisfying the thirst of any son of a not allied with the Confederate cause. Such as the likes of you. You yelling Yankee bastard.
Will I ever know the glory of the battlefield? Will I ever prove my bravery? Be honored for my courage?
We're going to the wars, Willie boy, Willie boy. We're going to the wars far away to protect our rights and laws, Willie boy, and the banner in the sun's golden rays. With your uniform all new and your shiny buttons too, you'll win the hearts of many pretty girls, but none like her so true. Mexican federal will! I said don't come in closer!
I don't know what the hell you're saying. Have I met with glory? What judgment will come of me?
Come to collect you, soldier. Where the hell's your horse at?
Dead.
What's this?
I shot someone.
Where's he at?
Dead.
Well, shoot someone. That's to be expected. What was the Union?
Mexican.
You don't get credit for Mexicans, kid.
For more On Story, check out our free podcast at onstory.tv or search the iTunes store and get the book today, On Story, Screenwriters and Their Craft, on Amazon.